I've been in the OB and lactation space for over a decade now, and I've been working very closely with pumping mothers for several years. And I wanted to talk to you today about something that I'm seeing happen quite a lot and what we can do about it. Milk supply seems to be at the heart of almost every question that I get for breastfeeding or pumping moms. Every mom wants to make enough milk for their baby. This makes total sense, but there is so much anxiety and uncertainty surrounding this topic. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I decided just to create a new term because I'm seeing this so often, and we really need to first identify it and then figure out how to work through it. So milk supply anxiety, that's what this video is going to be talking about, what it is, how to overcome it, and what to do with this. So first we have to start off with a definition, all right? So this was the best thing that I could come up with to describe this phenomenon that I'm seeing. And that is that breast milk supply anxiety refers to excessive worry and stress regarding the volume and or speed of breast milk production during breastfeeding or breast pumping. This anxiety can lead to a self-fulfilling cycle of concerns, as stress and anxiety themselves can slow down the milk ejection reflex, making it more difficult for the milk to be effectively removed. Whether a parent is nursing their baby directly or using a breast pump, this anxiety can result in emotional distress, irrational fears, and physical symptoms of anxiety, like an increased heart rate, muscle tension. These feelings are all connected to the belief that their milk supply production is inadequate, abnormal, or inconsistent with the norm, and this can negatively impact the overall feeding experience for both the parent and the baby. So that's the basic definition, and I'll post a more technical one on the blog, especially for any professionals who want to know a little bit more in depth what this is I'm talking about. But a very simple way to describe this is worrying excessively about your milk supply, whether it's actually low or not, makes it harder to express milk, causing a downward spiral of actual low milk supply. We know stress that can negatively affect milk supply. And I've said this in other videos, but the hormones that you need to release milk and make milk easily are in direct opposition to the stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. So we know when you're stressed, even in the moment, you have a spike of cortisol, that's going to make it harder for the oxytocin to work and let the milk down and out. Just makes sense, right? I do think it's important to note that these feelings of anxiety and stress can come from someone who actually has low milk supply, right? And that makes a lot of sense. This is a stressful scenario for you. This could also be happening though if your milk supply is fine and you just think it's low or it's less than you expected. I also see this surrounding pumping sessions in the length of the session and the frequency expected. So if they're taking longer than you thought or you're having to pump more often than you thought, we also see a lot of this milk supply anxiety surrounding the pumping aspect. Am I even doing it correctly? Why is this taking so long? All of these things. So what do we do about this, right? I realize that saying stop worrying is the most unhelpful thing in the world. That's like telling a woman in labor to just relax, right? She's going to punch you. Or telling a duck to turn purple. Like it just doesn't, it's not helpful or realistic to just say, well, stop worrying about it. It's fine. So let's talk about some realistic and practical suggestions to move away from milk supply anxiety. Just real quick before we jump into that, if you're struggling with your milk supply, with feelings of uncertainty about your supply, with knowing if you're pumping correctly, with juggling how to fit pumping into your career and managing all of those things, we have a long-term coaching program called Pumping for Working Moms. And this is where you can come and work directly with me and my team of other experts, and we can help you through this every step of the way. It's a one-time investment and you have us forever, which is fantastic. And I really want you to have the confidence that, one, you're doing this correctly, that you have realistic expectations, that you have someone in your corner to answer questions, and really just avoid the stress and anxiety that come with the unknown. And again, that's a big reason why we're talking about this topic in this video today. The longer I'm in this pumping space working with moms, the more I realize that pumping effectively and feeling good about your goal once you hit it is not all about the pump you have, just like putting it on, making sure your schedule's right, pushing play and like going. There's so much mental and emotional aspects of this experience that make a big difference, right? You can be pumping, you can hit your schedule, like I did with my first one. I had a whole other video on that. I don't want to spend too long talking about this. You can go watch that other video. But I made it to my goal, not quite like I wanted to, but it was not a good experience. And I did not look back on that with fond memories. And I want more than that for you. I want you to not only meet your goals, but also feel really good about it and to have less of this anxiety and stress all along the way. So if that's something that's interesting to you, there's a link down below to schedule a call, fill out an application, and talk with my team. Okay, so the first step in figuring out a plan of how to work through this is really to understand what's happening. And this is often the place that I go first with the clients that I work with, because we have to understand the problem and what's happening before we can come up with a plan to solve it, right? So I actually found something really interesting in a blog from the Breastfeeding Network that I want to kind of share with you, and it really helps us figure out why some of these things might be happening, specifically around your milk supply. And I also wanted to say, before we kind of like dive deep in, I know that the word anxiety can seem a little harsh and maybe be a little triggering. So if it helps you to think of it more as just like a general worrying, or kind of like an excessive worrying or excessive hyper focus, something like that, that's totally appropriate as well. So just frequent and difficult to control thoughts and concern, specifically around your milk supply. That's what we're talking about, okay? So I'm actually going to read this from this blog so I make sure I get it right. But it says, anxiety is a normal and healthy emotion which helps to tell us that something in our environment may be threatening, either physically or emotionally, to either ourselves or the people we care about. Feeling anxious about these situations encourages us to act to make ourselves safe. Without it, we would not be able to recognize danger or keep ourselves safe. Here you go. This is an important part. Sometimes, though, we misinterpret situations and start to believe that they are threatening when they are not. This can be affected by the information that we're given by others, how confident we feel about coping with the situation, and our experiences from the past. And these are kind of the three reasons that I'm also seeing that this milk supply anxiety or milk supply worry is really rearing its ugly head. First of all, the information that we're given by others. I understand, especially as a pumping expert in this field, there's just not a lot of quality pumping education and knowledge available out there, especially for working moms. And a lot of you are combining feeding at the breast and pumping. There's even less information out there for you on that. And so the information that we're given by others is not always the most accurate for our situation. You'll know if you go see, a provider and then a different provider, they might have different even ideas on how you should be feeding your baby, managing your healthcare, things like that. This happens in the field of lactation and healthcare pretty often, right? The second one, how confident we feel about coping with the situation. If you don't have the confidence that you're pumping correctly, that you have a quality schedule, that you're emptying your breasts as well as you should, these are all going to feed into this anxiety of, I'm not doing this right, this is stressful, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know who to ask. I asked my lactation consultant, but she doesn't know a lot about pumping. I asked my friends, but they're doing something a little bit different, or most of my friends are stay-at-home moms, they're not really pumping at all. How do I know if I'm doing this right? Again, those are all playing directly into the milk supply anxiety. It's all surrounded in this fact of we're lacking confidence that we're doing stuff correctly. That makes sense? And then the third one, I see this a lot, are experiences from the past. You'd be surprised how many second time, third time, fifth time moms that we get into our program that have they know how hard it is because they've tried it before and sadly it didn't work. Or it worked, like in my case, we made it to the goal, but it was not fun. It was not a positive experience. And I thought mostly when I launched this program years ago that I'd be serving mostly first-time moms, who've never done this before and stuff. But man, it's almost half and half where we get these first-time moms who are really trying to prepare and making sure that they're doing it the best they can right from the beginning, which I absolutely love. We're also getting a lot of moms who have done this before and it did not go great. And they're wanting a different experience this time. And I love both. All of these things can contribute to this milk supply anxiety that we're talking about here. The next step is to look at the numbers. And I'm smiling on this one because I am such a data nerd. And this is one of my most favorite things to do, especially with clients, is to really dive into the numbers. I often find myself reminding them to go back and look at what's actually happening because we have to know where we are and to know how far we need to go to build a realistic plan. Does that make sense? So thinking about milk supply on a larger scale is often what I'm talking about. So if you get hyper focused on the individual pumping sessions, for example, it can be really anxiety inducing. It can be really I only pumped 2.5 ounces on this session. I pumped 3 last time. Like, what's going on? I'm failing. I have to keep going until I hit these numbers. Or watching it and saying, where's my letdown? Okay, now I'm going to try and relax. I'm going to try and do all of these things that I know can help with a letdown so I can get this letdown. Like, we have to think about it on a larger scale. 24 hours is a really good time frame to look at your milk supply and what it's doing. And that can give you a much more big picture idea of what's happening. And then day to day and week to week, even month to month. I love it when a mom comes to me and she's like, I'm not pumping as much. Like, I think it's a little low. And I get to say, hang on. Do you remember 2 months ago when we were having this conversation and now you're pumping 8-9 ounces more a day than you were 2 months ago? Like, that feels amazing, but I know it is so hard in the moment for you to see these big progresses, these small wins stacked on top of each other, that when you look at it in a big chunk, it's amazing. So that's one of my favorite things to do, is kind of be the accountability keeper and say, I remember talking to you, or look at your log. A month ago you were pumping 600 ounces a day. Now you're at 750. Like, you're doing something right. We're meeting the baby's needs. If we're not, then we got to figure out how far we need to go. And you'd be surprised how often, when we actually look at the numbers, how often are you pumping in the day? One, it's often less than you think it is. If you're like, yes, I'm getting 7 sessions every day. You track it for a few days and you're like, ooh, I only got 5 the other day and 6 the next. I did get 7 one day. And it's surprising when you actually dive into some of your own data and figure out, what am I doing? Now, if that sounds stressful to you, then that's a whole nother conversation and even more reason to hire an expert to help with that. But I love looking at other people's spreadsheets. We use tracking apps too and whatever you want. But in fact, one time there was a gal that was like, she was doing really well. We had worked together. She'd been tracking on a spreadsheet that we had shared together. And she said, I said, you probably don't need to track much anymore unless you really like it. And then it helps you, then you can keep going. And she says, I am going to keep tracking and I am going to keep sharing it with you because it makes me really happy that somebody else cares about these numbers other than me. And I'm like, perfect. I absolutely do care. And I will continue to look at your spreadsheet and be happy and celebrate the small wins with you. So sometimes it's just like knowing that somebody else loves it and cares too. So one of my favorite things. But you might be surprised to know that you only have to make 2 more ounces a day to actually hit your needs. When if you don't run the numbers, it can feel like a mountain. It can feel like you're absolutely failing. You're not making enough for your baby. You're supplementing with formula or you're pulling milk out of the freezer and you feel defeated every day. But if you look at it and it's a 2 ounces, we can do that. That's half an ounce every session extra you got to get. Like, we can do that in our sleep. You know what I mean? So it just, I don't know. It always comes back to grounding in what we know. Knowing is half the battle. So don't skip that step. And then next, we have got to set realistic expectations. You have to know what is normal and what is not normal. What is normal for you, right? And I know social media gets a bad rap for a lot of things, but I think that this plays a huge part in this milk supply anxiety because people are not wrong for wanting to share their big wins with everybody else. I would want to do that too. Like, oh my word, I pumped 3 ounces on each side today. Like, bam, look at this milk. I'm so happy. And I'm so happy for you too. And please don't stop doing that. But please also post some of the bad days. And so that we can have a more realistic picture of what this journey looks like. I think social media in particular is really sharing wins, and people, they don't want to share vulnerable and icky parts, and I get it. So you just have to be cautious that you actually know what's realistic for you. I would say that with the women that I've worked with, having a milk supply that is just enough for the next day is more often the norm of what I see. And again, if you are feeding your baby at the breast on maternity leave, this makes 100% sense. Your body is not going to make more milk than it needs. Why would it? Why would you do more work? When you start pumping, if your supply is lower than what your baby needs, then there's a problem there. Either we're not pumping efficiently, we're not feeding the baby appropriately. Sometimes it's a combination of the two. Most often it's the pumping part because it's like a whole different skill to feeding the breast. But if you're only making enough for the next day, this is actually very normal and appropriate. If you want to create a little oversupply to have that little extra buffer, we can do that too. But we really have to figure out what is normal? And then also, what is a realistic expectation for you? Okay, if you are a busy surgeon or you are a lawyer and you want this like oversupply and stuff, and you have to pump every 2 hours at work to get that, and you have to be really hands-on and very efficient, and maybe it's doable for you, but good grief, I don't know. So these are the conversations that we have to have. Is this realistic for you, right? How much extra work are you going to have to put in to get this result? And is the juice worth the squeeze for you? Okay. For me, adding in an extra pumping session every day after my kids go to bed or whatever, like, and I want to go to bed and I'm getting like 1.5 ounces extra, am I going to continue to do that? No. But a mom who's 1.5 ounces short, that might be 100% worth it for her, right? And we're all different. Babies grow too. They have different needs at different ages. Your milk supply does some different things at different ages. When you get your period back, it adjusts again. Everybody has a different length of pumping session that works best for them. Everyone has a different breast milk storage capacity. Like, I know I'm throwing a lot of terms and things at you, and I know it's really complicated, but we can break it down to the basics and figure out what works for you. So finding realistic expectations is really important. And I think that this whole milk supply anxiety conversation is largely based around this, is that our expectations are not lining up with reality or our current reality or what's possible in our reality. And so I'm not saying stress less, it's fine. It might not be fine. You might actually have low milk supply, especially if you have been stressing for a long time, if you just can't get this out of your head and you're just kind of spiraling down, and you might actually have low supply, right? So if you're struggling and if you want some help long term, if you're a working mom who's pumping, reach out to us. This is exactly what we do. And I just want you to know that we have so much pumping education on how to do this all correctly, but it's also sprinkled in with a lot of the mental stuff of this. It is not all about your pumping schedule and the quality of your breast pump and your flange size, right? These are important aspects of this process, but the mental part is huge too. And on our weekly group calls, a lot of times we're just working through some of these mental barriers. Like, how often do I actually have to say to someone, you're already doing it? Like, and you have my blessing to keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job, and I get to mean it and help them. So anyway, this video went a little longer than I wanted, but if you're still here and you want some help, there's a link down below to get the help that you need. I'll put another video up here on milk supply, obviously, because if you're watching this video, you have questions about milk supply and I'd love to answer them the best I can. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you thought. Have you ever experienced this? Let's add to this, make it better. And we'll see you on the next video. Happy pumping.